and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, an American living in Japan for 20 years. I've gone through some massive life changes and crises in my 20 years here. At its bleakest, I felt very isolated, alone, and helpless in the face of what was happening. I relied on alcohol and cigarettes to get through it the best I knew how, which worked until it didn't, and everything fell apart. I made it through with a little help from my friends, a fledgling mindfulness practice, and learning how to become my own strongest ally. I quit drinking and smoking, worked my way through my grief, found ways to forgive, created new connections, and started a regular exercise, meditation, and self-care routine. I've also become a national board certified health and wellness coach along the way, and developed a desire and passion to help others on their own personal journeys. This podcast is all about change, growth, healing yourself, learning how to get back up after life kicks you down, and exploring mindfulness and self-compassion as incredible tools available to each and every one of us to do just that. Welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, and today's episode, I'm very excited because this marks the beginning of season 2 for my podcast. It was 1 year ago in August when I launched my first episode, and today I am joined by a very special guest, the lovely Marci Kobayashi. She is a writer, teacher, and business owner based in Hiroshima, Japan. Originally from the US, she first came to Japan as a college student in the early 90s and has made it her home ever since. Marci is the author of Finding Yoyu, the Japanese compass for navigating overwhelm and cultivating abundance in 7 areas of life. Her writing blends personal storytelling with practical insight, offering readers a fresh and compassionate lens on balance, resilience, and the hidden pressures many women face. All things that I love to talk about as well. So it's so great to have you here today, Marci.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm so happy that I get to be part of your new season. What an honor. Thank you.
Wonderful. To begin with, I just finished reading Finding Yoyu. I finished up last weekend and it was amazing and awesome and resonated. And I just really loved so many aspects about it. I'm sure that will inform most of our conversation today. But before we launch into the specifics of the book, I thought it would be helpful to my listeners if you could kind of give us a little bit of your story. So you seem to have worn many hats since you came to Japan as a college student in the 90s. Could you give us a brief rundown of your story and the path that led you here and to writing Finding Yoyu?
Sure. So yes, I came over in the early 90s and, I'm one of those who I didn't really have some big love of Japan. It wasn't like my dream to visit Japan. It was more that I wanted to have a study abroad experience. I wanted to go somewhere, and it just was the convenient choice for me, which sounds crazy, but my mother had rooms available in her home when I left for college, and my sister was already in college. So she started offering her home up she became a host mother. So Japanese girls were doing homestays in her home. And my sister, after she graduated from college, decided to go teach English in Japan. And so I thought, oh, well, Japan, it's coming at me from all these angles. So maybe I'll study a little Japanese. That'll be something kind of unique and fun. And maybe I'll go to Japan. And so I did. And everything after that, just one thing led to the other, and I'm still here. But I came as a college student to study Japanese and did that. I did go back to the States to graduate. My degree was in environmental education, and I haven't really used that at all until just recently. So
well, I was a religion major. Yeah, a religion major with a concentration in Hinduism. So we don't always use our degrees right away.
Right. But they come with us. So I did come back to Japan right after college in the US because I was on a Monbusho scholarship. So I was at Tsukuba University for a year and thought that I was going to do my master's in environmental education. But the professor that I was supposed to study under retired, and I didn't realize that that was in his plans when I applied for the scholarship. And so there I was trying to decide whether I should keep on there with a new professor, and I was really confused, and I got a job offer to work at the university where I had first been an exchange student. And so I took it because I just was done with studying. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do something. And that started my path with international education and study abroad advising and creating and helping to coordinate international programs. And I did that thinking that was going to be my career. And a year later, I had to give up my dream job because my father had cancer and I was the most able person to go home to be with him. Of course, there were other family members around, but with my sister, she was in a job and she couldn't do it, but I could. So I decided to leave. And the thing is that he did pass like very shortly after that. And I ended up coming back to Japan. But that hat of the international education hat, I thought was over for a while. And so I did what a lot of people do when they first come to Japan. I started teaching English. And that was a good experience. And I was going to go back to the world of study abroad programs. And I had decided with my soon, a few years later to be husband, he was my partner at the time, that we were going to have this company to support students who wanted to go to the US to study abroad. Any other country would be fine too, but since I was from the US, it made sense to be there. Right. And that's when 9/11 happened. And we realized that not very many people were going to want to study abroad for a while. And so I quickly pivoted and we decided to open an English school instead. And I never wanted to be an English teacher. That wasn't what I thought was my future. I did enjoy it. We had a lot of great years and I'm friends with many of the people who I worked with in those first few years. But I wore that hat for a good 10 years running an English school. And then decided I wanted to go back to the study abroad advising, and we closed up our school and I was going to do it all online. And I'm so glad that I did make that move because shortly after that, it was really, I needed to be at home to help care for my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. We didn't know that their condition had changed so much. And my mother-in-law needed full-time care and she ended up going into a nursing home near us. But my father-in-law, we discovered, had Alzheimer's. We thought it was just his quirky personality. We didn't realize we weren't around him enough to see that actually he needed a lot more help. I'm in Hiroshima now living in their house, but at the time we were in Tokyo and we made the difficult decision to move them from a very remote part of Hiroshima to downtown Tokyo. Well, not downtown. We were actually in Hachioji, for anybody here who's in Japan and knows. So that was a big change for my life. So I was trying to change my business, do something different, and then also caring for being the primary caregiver for these two people. And
so everything kind of converged right at that same kind of time. You had a really big career shift happening and then family situation changing. And that's a monumental shift, inviting even your family members into your tiny Tokyo condo. It's a lot.
It was. And I really was in the middle of shifting career-wise because I thought I was going to do study abroad advising, but it's not really where my passion was. And I ended up shifting over into web design, which I love, is a lot of fun. But right as all that was happening, my husband also discovered he had stage 3 colon cancer. And it was like, what? Really? Like how could one more thing happen? Just there was like, that was almost the tipping point for me, but we held it all together. In the end, I wrote a book. So.
I know that you have listened to parts of my story, and so I can really empathize and understand that it's like, okay, this is a challenging time. Okay, there's some transition happening. Okay, like I'm rolling. And then it's just like one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm almost flattened here. Like I cannot take any more. However, and with the benefit of hindsight, you did write a book and you have found all of these, different ways of obviously coping and thriving in the midst of a lot of great challenges. So that might be a really nice segue into asking you about what Yoyu is. Can you kind of explain what the basic concept is?
Sure, sure. So if anyone's not familiar with it, Yoyu is a really basic word that's used in daily conversation all the time in Japanese. And for example, it's used when we talk about our finances and we can't afford something. Instead of the word afford, we'd use Yoyu. Like, I don't have the Yoyu to buy a new car. So the word itself, Yoyu, means, if we were to say it in English, we use words like afford or wherewithal or oomph or reserves. All these different words that we use in English, you can just use the one word, Yoyu. And I knew about it. I knew to use it when we talk about time. Like, if you don't have Yoyu in your schedule, you don't have enough time in your schedule to add anything more. Or I knew about it, like I said, about finances, whether you can afford something or not. But as I got further in, I realized that we use it in a lot of other different ways too. Like, if you have enough space. So if you're trying to park your car and the parking space is not big enough, then you maybe don't have the Yoyu to park there. Or in my case, we got a sofa at Costco and we measured our living room to make sure it would fit, but we forgot to check the elevator. So there wasn't enough Yoyu. There was Yoyu in our home, but not in our elevator. And we had to send the sofa back. That was terrible. But also, I think the reason why, and I might be jumping ahead here, but the reason why I talk about and kind of latched on to this concept of Yoyu is because it's what helped me get through a lot of difficult times, to immediately start thinking about, do I have Yoyu or not, in terms of time or energy or money or space or my capabilities, or even emotionally or spiritually. And those are the 7 areas that I talk about in the book. But I knew it. I've studied Japanese, so I knew how to say Yoyu and I knew how to use it in conversation, but I really didn't know it or recognize it or see it until there was a new grocery clerk at our local store. And she always had kind of this really grumpy look on her face. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna make her smile. And so I went out of my way to go through her aisle and to smile at her, to try to chitty chat with her, to try to do anything to make her come out. And it didn't work. Again and again and again, I gave up, and I don't give up easily, but I did. And I decided that the store had made a mistake, that she was one of those people who shouldn't be in customer service, and that they really needed to move her to a different department. And I started going through a different aisle. Fast forward a few months, and my mother was visiting, and she doesn't speak Japanese, but she was brave and went to the grocery store by herself. And she came home one day and said, "Oh, I met the most lovely cashier. She was smiling and chitty-chatting with me." And I was pretty sure I knew who she meant. And so the next time we went to the grocery store, she pointed out not the woman I thought she was going to point out, but the woman with the bitter face, who was now smiling and laughing and engaging with the other customers. And that's when I realized, all along before, she simply didn't have Yoyu yet. She didn't have the competence or the confidence that comes after you've been doing something for a while. And in the beginning, she could only do her job. She couldn't do anything more than that. She couldn't talk to me. She couldn't smile up to me. All she could do was scan the groceries. And that's when I started really paying attention to Yoyu and whether or not I have Yoyu in any situation, and whether I don't have it, which is what we usually talk about when we don't have it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I first heard it used in the abundant side of things. It wasn't a lack. It was, and I forget exactly what it was, but I was impressed, or I was amazed that someone could do something so effortlessly. And I said, "How can you do that?" Or whatever it was. And he just said, "Yoyu." And I was like, but that was a new word for me at the time. And so it's really, really interesting that I think we do often talk about it in terms of a lack. Right. We don't have the Yoyu, like the financial space or the energetic space. And I think the the concept as a whole is really, really interesting to think about, especially for me in terms of an abundant mindset or a scarcity mindset way. But I thought it was really beautiful the way that you kind of fleshed out these different areas of life. Because I think it is something that we can kind of, if we're lucky, we can kind of tune into that sense of like, using the competency as an example, right? Starting a new job, learning how to drive, speaking Japanese, all of these different areas that I've gone through in my life of I'm unsure and I feel kind of stressed out all the time, like a low level stress. That's because I don't have the Yoyu to do those things. But with practice and confidence and all of that, then all of those things now I don't think twice about. They're all very comfortable now.
And that's when in Japanese we'd say yo you yo you, like piece of cake, I got that, no problem. And I love that.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious. Obviously, this became a kind of like framework or kind of almost like mechanism for you to kind of start to explore how you could cultivate more Yoyu, how you could kind of borrow from different areas to help balance out the different kind of energetic areas of life to feel more balanced and things. But do you have a favorite area of Yoyu or something that particularly really supports you the most? Or is it a balanced kind of thing?
It's a really good question. I don't know that I have a favorite, but the one that comes up the most often that I recognize is the time. Do I have the time to do something or not? I end up saying yes to more than I have the Yoyu to do time-wise, or I think that's the case. And so I'm constantly having to come back and look at, okay, how am I using my time and how could I change this a little bit? The energy one, I don't know, I think they all kind of cycle around. I have to admit, though, that probably the spiritual one is the one I ignore the most, but that helps me the most. And for example, for you, I know that you like to meditate in the morning and you have gratitude exercises that you said you do, or I was listening in your podcast. Those are the kinds of things that if I forget to do, that's where I notice that I don't have Yoyu. And those are that's what I mean by spirituality. And those are some of the simple things that are so easy to do that I forget. So it should be my favorite, and it's not. But if I had to choose one, I'd probably go back to the story of the grocery clerk, because it's the one where it helped me realize that Yoyu is even a thing to think about. But for me, being able to recognize that there's different types of Yoyu and whether or not that I have it or not, actually really helped so much in the home to be able to communicate. It was a way for me to talk. And you would think that it would be with my husband or my father-in-law. They're both Japanese. And so, yes, we're using Japanese to communicate. And it did. It helped a lot with my husband so that we had a starting place. If I couldn't do something or I was overwhelmed in some way, I could simply say, I don't have Yoyu right now. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And he'd step back and give me the time or whatever he thought I might need. But it also has helped with my family back in the States, because they now use the word Yoyu. And we've been able to put a word on that feeling of overwhelm, even at that point where we're not sure what it is that we're missing. At least we can name it. And it's really helped, I think, all of us to be able to have a starting point to talk about what could we change to make it better.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I'm just thinking I'm like, okay, well, my husband's Japanese. I could start using Yoyu as a term as well. It's really interesting to think about that. It's almost like a code word for communicating your emotional needs. That's the thing that's coming to me the most of just, I need support. I am lacking, even if it's not an emotional need area, but I am lacking in something, whether that's energy or time. Or you use the story in your book about when you used to teach children, which I definitely know about. I was a kids teacher for many, many years, but that, you didn't really have the Yoyu, like the energy and the wherewithal to prepare dinner like you usually do on that night. So husband took over and problem solved, kind of a thing. And so It's just this beautiful way to communicate. I need a little help. I need a little support. I'm lacking.
Yeah, and it took us a while to get to that too. And I think if you read the book, you also know that I think at one point I shared that we had a lot of arguments, a lot of really ridiculous arguments that were all because I was just exhausted and was reacting and I didn't have Yoyu. And as soon as we took that making dinner off the plate, and it's not like it's a rule in the house that I have to make dinner. I actually really enjoy cooking. I like to be the one that's in charge of grocery shopping and cooking and planning, all of that. I love that. I get a lot of Yoyu from being in the kitchen. It's one of the places where I go to actually re-energize, but not those nights after I had been teaching. It didn't work for me. And so when we finally figured that out and we put him in charge and he said, hey, I'll take care of it. It changed the dynamic of that night. And then sometimes I was able still to come in and cook, and I loved it because I didn't have to. And it was more of just to do it for fun. But the funny thing is that I think once you figure out where you might be lacking Yoyu and you found the solution, you have to keep the solution as best as possible. And I put him in charge, but then there were a couple times when he was away on a business trip and I was stuck again having to make dinner. And it wasn't just for myself, it was for my father-in-law too. And he would eat anything, but I was always trying to make sure there was a good meal. And it didn't occur to me right away that I could just do what my husband does when he doesn't want to cook. He just would go and buy something. And giving myself permission to also do that took a few weeks for me to figure out that would be okay, that I could channel my inner husband and just go to the grocery store and buy some foods to put on the table. So we can't do that now where we live because we're too far away from a grocery store. But then living in Tokyo, I could do that. So
yeah. Well, actually, a couple different things came up for me in that. You're realizing that you're using Yoyu to communicate where you need a little support, where you're feeling a little lack to your husband. But the first step is recognizing it in yourself, right? And the kind of arguments that led up to the understanding of, oh, hey, this is what's going on. I just don't have the oomph to do it tonight. That actually touches on something that I was really struck reading your book, how you share all of these personal stories of how you were able to communicate what you needed. So not even necessarily like a direct communication, but you talked about the story of kind of closing the door on Otoo-san so he wouldn't come into your space in the mornings and things like that. I was struck by a feeling of kind of like ease and graciousness. Of course, I'm reading the book and this is the final product and this is the end result of this journey. But it really felt to me, oh, wow, she was able to find a way to communicate to her husband or communicate to her father-in-law or other people in her life. I don't even know what the question is really here, but it's kind of like when I have been stressed out and I have had those reactive moments in my life, and I think it's a very human thing. I'm just stuck in my head, right? Like I cannot see anything outside or any bigger perspective. And so it makes me really reactive and it makes me think, well, why can't they see? Why do I have to explain? And I didn't really get that kind of vibe from the story. And so I was really curious to ask you about that. Is that very intentional? Was that just the way that things turned out?
A little of both. I mean, of course, part of it, like the story you shared or commented on about my father-in-law, I call him Otoo-san, which means father in Japanese. He would always want to come in and clean the floor, sweep the floor. It was one of his jobs in our house. And he would do it when I was writing or meditating. And I really didn't want him to interrupt me. And it happened many times. And I didn't always act kindly. Most of the time I could, because he had, dementia, he had Alzheimer's. And so he couldn't always understand why I was angry or sometimes didn't even notice that I was angry.
Right,
so it wasn't helpful for me to become angry. It was only hurting myself. So it happened enough times that I knew I had to do something different and find a different way to communicate with him, because saying something to him Even the night before, hey, Otosan, can you wait until after 7 o'clock to come sweep the floor? And you, yeah, okay. And then he would come in at 5:45, coming in to clean. So in part, yeah, the book does take a shortcut there and doesn't give you all of the times that I did get angry, but at the same time, I don't know who first said it, and so I can't give proper credit, but there's that saying of every obstacle is an opportunity. And I really felt that. So there was that in my head, and also this idea, we can do this with Yoyu. We can have Yoyu. We don't have to be in this situation of caring for and making a new home for my father-in-law. And it doesn't have to be stressful. We can find a way. I don't always know how it's going to be, but we started out with that idea that let's do this and let's have fun with this. Let's find a way. And so every time we found something that bothered us, we, meaning my husband and I, we would voice it to each other to try to find the solutions, even little ones. Like it really bothered him because I would take the toothpaste tube and I would squeeze it in the middle because it feels good to squeeze it and squeeze out the toothpaste. And he would get so angry. He wanted me to squeeze it from the bottom so that it would all go to the top. And I don't care. When it starts to run out, you can roll it up then. But that bothered him. So I go, okay, well, if that really bothers you, it doesn't bother me, but I can make a change. So we started with as many little things that we could find as possible to try to make changes. And that, I think, made it easier when we got to the big stuff that we couldn't find easy solutions for, like where we were going to sleep.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, and that really resonates with all of the work that I have done personally on myself, but the work that I do with clients as well is, we start with like the smallest, tiniest, easiest baby step and build up whatever that muscle is, build from there. So you kind of had the practice with your husband already of like, okay, let's make this light and fun and a positive experience. We don't have to trudge through life kind of a thing, which I think a lot of people inadvertently do. I'm just thinking about, as you're saying things, I'm like, okay, how is that applied in my life and in my marriage? One of our little things that made a huge difference for me, but my husband never thought about, was rinsing out the tub. So after you use the tub, for me, if you rinse it out with the shower afterwards, then you don't have to actually wash it every single day. And I do not have time to wash the bathtub every single day. And he didn't quite get it. And I think that came up, we were talking to like some friends at a party or something. And by saying it in front of everyone, he realized I was really serious. But he changed and he started doing that, and he understands. It makes my life easier. It makes my workload less, just to share a little bit.
That's a great example. That's a great example, because that's one of those little things that, and I think it's sometimes those little things that then trigger everything else that's been building up. And that's when we have the explosions. And if we can like just shift it a little bit, just a teeny bit, it can make a huge difference for the rest of the day. And
I was just thinking, I forget exactly what part of the book it was, but there was another part that you were talking about a micro moment, do just a little tiny bit of work. And that resonated so much with me as a mom, because I think that's just kind of like built-in mom life, or maybe something I evolved over the years. I'm in the kitchen, so I'm just going to start the tea now. It takes 1 second. And my problem, though, is that I get then lost in all of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm like, hanging up the laundry. Okay, real quick, I'll just do this other thing. And it kind of snowballs for me.
But I remember the story because I had gone into the kitchen while I was taking a break from my work, and I think I pulled something out of the freezer or got the greens out on the counter so I'd be ready when I came in to cook lunch. And the one thing I found is that if I knew that I was doing something little to help move me one step further, that helped. But if I try to cram and use every single little minute available to me, then I run out of Yoyu altogether. So, I mean, just using the little time I had while I was waiting for the water to boil to make another cup of tea or a cup of coffee. It's like, well, what can I do right now while I'm standing here? Just using that little moment.
It is a very fine line, though, too, isn't it? I think with just Yoyu in general, though, probably is finding the things that are going to support us or benefit us or nourish us without adding more pressure or adding more stress or,
Right.
oh, I've got to do this to build up my spiritual yo-yo or something. And that's the exact opposite of the energy that we want to bring to it.
Right. Yeah. And talking about our families, I think sometimes it was difficult for me to figure out what I needed and where I didn't have yo-yo, but it was a lot easier to start noticing other people. So I could see with my husband when he was running out of yo-yo and things that he couldn't handle. And I talked about this in the book a little bit too, that he would come home from work and at dinner he would get really grumpy and really borderline mean towards his father. And wow, I was looking at that thinking, what's wrong with you? This is your father. Don't be mean to him. I mean, verbally or just ignoring him. And it's just, he didn't have yo-yo to deal with his father at that time. In the mornings, he was a lot better, but at night, he just really couldn't. I could see that. He couldn't see that. All he could do was feel that he was really uncomfortable. But what we finally did to shift it is when dinner was ready, I would call his father in first, and his father would get situated at the table and he would start talking. And as soon as took about 10 to 15 minutes, but I let him get all talked out. And then I would call my husband to the table, hey, dinner's ready. So that by the time my husband came in to eat with us, then Oto-san was quiet and just happy to just eat. And it sounds terrible, like, yeah, shut him up so that your husband can have a quiet meal. It wasn't that. It's just that it was one way to preserve the peace in our house so that it was kind of a win-win. My husband could have a break. He could feel more ready to interact with us, and he didn't need to try to pay attention and listen to his father. I could do that. And then his father felt like he had been listened to and paid, gotten the attention he needed. So it worked for us because I was able to see, this situation keeps repeating over and over because Akira doesn't have yo-yo. It's not that he's a mean person. It's not he's a bad person. He just doesn't have yo-yo in this situation. So what could I do to shift things? So that helped us a lot too, was recognizing for each other when we didn't have yo-yo.
Well, and I think that is a great example as well of the thing that you talk about of finding what works for us, right?
Yeah.
That story resonated so much with me. I really wanted to share this with you too, because there was a couple different examples. You talked about how you kind of had to renegotiate your sleeping arrangement with your husband. And I think in Japan, that's really common though. I think that, there isn't like a right way to do that once you actually start talking to people. So when you're talking about the pajamas, and it was so funny because as I'm reading in the book, I'm just like, why is she so stressed out about the pajamas? Like, what's the big deal about the pajamas? But for you had this kind of idea in your mind of, you must change into pajamas for bed. That was just your thing. So
even though I don't wear pajamas, I I just wanted my father-in-law to wear pajamas. Oto-san must wear pajamas.
Yeah. And so I wanted to share with you, though, my pajamas story was that when I last went home, unfortunately, was in 2019. It was before COVID. My daughter was 5-ish, I guess she would have been. And my husband was with us as well. I'm from Southwest Michigan. There's big, huge lawns. My husband doesn't speak English, so he's usually kind of bored. And so the family friends we were staying with, he was offering, like, can I do some work, like around the house or around the yard? So they taught him how, with me translating, taught him how to use the riding lawnmower. And that was a chore that I grew up doing. And so I knew the way that you are supposed to mow the lawn. My dad taught me, as a 10-year-old, and I always knew how to do it. And then when my husband was doing that, and my daughter, of course, was excited, can I sit on your lap? And so I'm watching them, and he's just, all over the place. No rhyme or reason, just having a good time. They're going for a joyride, and I'm trying to shout directions and instructions over them. And then they kind of gave up halfway through because it was a huge lawn, and I just kind of let it go. But I think even after he finished, I'm like, well, you got to do it this way. You have to do this, that, and the other. And I was sharing this story to the friend whose house it was later. Can you believe it? He didn't know you're supposed to go around the outside edge first, and you go smaller and smaller into the rings or whatever. She just looks at me and she's like, well, it's not like it's neurosurgery. If the job gets done, if the grass gets cut, who cares how he does it? And it was just like, whoa, what? You could not do it in this concentric circle way? It literally totally blew my mind. But I share all of that to say that we all have these really ingrained fixed ideas about lots of different areas of life. And if we're able to somehow take that step back, either through self-reflection or, like you were saying, someone else helping us to see, it doesn't have to be that way, then we can figure out what works for us. I think we're in the unique position as foreign women married to Japanese men and living in a kind of third cultural household that either we can feel limited or liberated by that situation.
Right.
So I know when I was pregnant, and I know a lot of other women that they get stressed out. It is stressful in general to be pregnant in another country and try to navigate things in another language and different beliefs. And, Japanese doctors can be pretty mean about weight gain for foreign women and different things. But for me, I was just like, you know what? I'm picking and choosing. I'm going to listen to the American doctors for the weight gain limits. I'm going to listen to the Japanese doctors for this piece of it. I'm just going to pick and choose what's the best. We want to make life as easy on ourselves as we can. And I think that's really what Finding Yoyu and all these different kind of tips and tricks that you have in the book is about. How do we make it easier on ourselves? Life's hard enough
and
as
that's
it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay to make it easier. We don't have to suffer.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So can I ask you, I'm curious about this idea of making life easier on ourselves. So you have a journal with 4 different prompts to help cultivate a daily practice of kind of reflection and intention setting. But one of the questions, the last question is, I am asking for help with. The prompt is, I am asking for help with. And I noticed when I first saw that, I immediately thought, well, what happens when you don't have anyone to ask for help? Which I think it's a pretty common and pretty natural reaction, especially for moms. I think in Japan, we can feel so unsupported and so alone. And so I was really curious what your take on that was.
Sure. Okay. So I'm not a mom. I don't have children, but I did have my father-in-law who had Alzheimer's living with us. So in a way, it's very similar, I think. I can only guess because I don't have kids. I've taught kids. But I think the big difference is that as your kids grow up and become more and more capable, I had the opposite. He was growing and less capable in things. So there were some similar feelings. I'm not a mom, so I can't say that for sure, but I can guess that probably some of the things that I felt and that some of the other listeners who might be older, maybe they didn't have a pregnancy in Japan, but they might have been going through menopause in Japan or getting older, that some of the similarities there, but asking for help. For me, the reason why I had to put it there is because I sometimes didn't realize that I needed help with something. So even if I didn't know who to ask, or if there even was somebody available, just making a note that this is an area where I could use some help. So I'm asking for help. I put it there so that I would remember to try to write something down. And almost as soon as I would write something down, I would quite often think of a solution. Or later in the day, something would come to me and I would think, oh, well, I don't have anyone to ask, but if I tried that might help me. It was a way to help bring it into my awareness of where I needed the help. I don't always get the answer right away. Sometimes I am writing the same thing over and over and over again for weeks. Like, for example, I'm still waiting for Audible to put my audiobook up. It's on all the other platforms. It's not on Audible yet. So every day I'm asking for help from anybody and everyone. Please let Audible put my book up online. So just putting those things out there for where I'm lacking, where it's out of my control. And then if I can find somebody or something to help me, great. Or I let it go. That idea of let go, let God, or whatever higher power, if you look to a higher power or the universe or whatever, I let it go out there so that my reticular activating system can start looking for an answer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that I practice myself. And I know a lot of people find whatever version of manifestation and things that you believe in, but there is definitely something to that. I really appreciate the way that you answered that question, though, and that it's more of a check in with yourself and a naming of a way of recognizing somewhere where you are struggling or where you do need some help. And like you said, just by naming it, recognizing it, and writing it down, you're kind of tricking your mind into looking for solutions, right? Or looking for possibilities and opportunities. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I think we do feel like we need to do everything. Well, a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, I'll say me. We feel like we need to do everything by ourselves, or we have, again, those fixed ideas about this is the way it's supposed to be. Like, I have to do it this way. And it's another kind of technique for taking some of that pressure off of ourselves, trying to give ourselves a little bit more perspective.
It's also, I mean, that whole journal, it's published, it's out there. The people could buy it from Amazon if they want. But I really used the 4 prompts that are in there every day, just in like a little notebook. I did them all the time, but I would consistently forget one of them. So that's why I made it into a journal that's published, so that I would have to buy it myself and use it, so that I would remember to write all 4. And it's what I use instead of a to-do list, because during the busiest, craziest times when I didn't have Yoyu, a to-do list really had a kind of opposite. It didn't inspire me. It really upset me. It really stressed me out, because every day I would put all kinds of these things on my list, and every day I'd come back and there was nothing I could cross off on the list. But I knew I had been busy. I had been doing so much. And as soon as I shifted to instead starting to make note of all the things that I actually did get done, it made me feel so good about myself. Not that, oh, I'm so wonderful, but I started to recognize what I was doing and moving forward. Kind of like you talked about this on your podcast at the end of the year, when you looked back at all the things that you had done throughout the year and how much you had moved forward. And that's what I like to do. And maybe that's because we've been in Japan for so long, and this culture is a lot about looking back at our past. But I look at that, and instead of setting a to-do list, I think about what I'm actually truly intending, or what I'm actually truly tending to right now. I like to put intentions and write goals and that kind of thing too, but it helps me more when I make a note of what's really front and center in my life right now. Yes, I have these things that I want to do in my business. Yes, I have these writing goals. Yes, I have these projects I want to do in the house. But actually, this one little issue in our family is the thing that's my mind is working on. And so that's what I'm going to write down. So I'm going to be able to get to those other things anyway. They're going to be taken care of. But this is the thing that I'm really actually tending to in reality. And sometimes it's a business matter. Sometimes it's a family matter. But when I started to make note of that, that helped me shift more into feeling good about how I was spending my days.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I mean, and maybe it's a personality thing, because even when I was teaching, a lot of places, I mean, understandably enough, want your lesson plan, but I don't work that way. I think because I had lots of yo-yo of being a children's teacher, I had so many years experience, I kind of had the lesson plans, the to-do list in my brain, but things change, and you got to be flexible, and you've got to be able to kind of think on your feet. So I would write what I did. At the end of the day, after I said goodbye to the children, then I would write down what we actually did, because the plan and what we actually end up doing can often be very, very different. Yeah, I really love that. Yeah, also that play with intending and tending, because I feel like intentions are intentions. They kind of are the basis, or the kind of supportive underpinning of the actual actions that we are tending to or we're doing. So I like that play on that word.
Yeah. I don't always remember, but I try, because I still get suckered into, that sounds terrible. I don't mean that. I still make goals sometimes, but I often don't, because I get upset about whether I've succeeded or not at the goals. And it's a lot better to look back at what I did accomplish,
and
especially during the busy times.
Right. And I think it's just such human nature. You know, we have such a strong negativity bias and we don't look at the things that we're doing right. And so we really need to intentionally take that step back and look and say, oh, wait, I did all of these things. I kind of have it's not that I have a love-hate relationship, but I am wary of recommending clients to track things like with apps, because I think you can get really sucked into the minutia of the numbers, and I'm just not that kind of a numbers person. I've gone down that rabbit hole and it's not pretty when it happens. So I know that about myself, you know.
I understand.
Even now, I write down that I sit. I don't write down the amount of minutes that I meditate, because I think I knew early on in my practice that would start messing with my mind, and I would get very perfectionistic and I would feel pressured and stuff. Now it's just, I sat. Doesn't matter how many minutes it is, right? Like it's evolved, it's changed, and I can let myself off the hook that way too. But I did it, right? Tracking is also very beneficial to look back at each week, and I can see sit every morning, right? And I might think, oh, I didn't do a very good job because one day it was actually laying down in bed, or I only did it for 5 minutes because then my son woke up or something like that. If I think about it, I think I did a bad job. But if I look back and just see sit, I did it every day. That's amazing, right? And you don't realize that unless you're actually making note of it.
It's true. That's so true. I'm always surprised when I look back. And the things that I note down of what I did, some of them are work related, but a lot of times they're things like, yes, I finally sent that letter I've been meaning to send, or I finally folded that pile of clothes that's been bothering me. Or there are these little things that just,
no, I am all about small wins. They really make a big difference. But I mean, that honestly is what helps us to feel competent and confident and like we have used our time wisely, and you know, all of those things that you talk about in the book. When I was finishing reading Yoyu, and the last section is this section on spirituality, and then there's another chapter on kind of cultivating Yoyu, and it was then that I was also able to kind of see this bigger picture, that this book is the end result of you really finding your way and finding your footing and finding what worked for you through a really difficult time of your life, which of course really resonates with me. And I wonder if you had any thoughts to share on that process, or if you could see that was happening at any point during that difficult, stressed out time, or was this something that you kind of saw afterwards?
Okay, so during the first year, shortly after we brought Oto-san to live with us, I mean, that whole adventure started really the summer of 2014. That was when we got kind of the first wake-up call that something was not right. And then it was by January 2015 that they were then living with us. But every time, I have a really great relationship with my family back in the States. And so whenever I would call, and I call, even today, I still call once a day or text or something, I kept hearing over and over again, either from my mother or my sister, you have to write this down. These are great stories. Oh my gosh, these are so funny. This is going to help somebody someday. And so I started to write anything and everything that was happening to me. And really, and if you read the book, you find out that that's really the way I kind of found my grounding and could find my way back to myself again and again every day, is because I would write as much as I could about what was happening each morning. I mean, each morning I would write about what had been happening and what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and that's how I could process. And I knew there was something more. And I actually thought that I was going to be writing a memoir. And I have this 90,000 word document on my computer, a memoir that has way more stories of things of what happened starting in 2014, the summer that I stayed here alone with my in-laws, all the way up and through to when they were living with us and my mother-in-law passing, my father-in-law passing, and all of that. But when it came to editing, working with a book coach, we realized it was too much, that I was trying to share too much, that there was this huge concept of Yoyu that I really wanted to share with people as a tool that they could use too. But then there was this story of my transformation of where I was at before all that happened, and then going through all of that and trying to do both in the same book. It was really too much. And so I went the easier route to do the self-help book, the teaching memoir book first. And now the next step is to get the other memoir out there that really shows some of the other parts, some of the other stories. And I think if somebody hears what I was going through, they might pick up the book Finding Yoyu and think it's a book about somebody who is dealing with a family member who has Alzheimer's. And there are some stories about that in there, but there are a lot of other stories that I brought in about my childhood and other stages of my life. So it's really not a caregiving book. I don't think a caregiver could benefit from it, but I don't think it belongs on a caregiving shelf. The memoir might be more, I'm not sure. But I don't know that, I mean, I knew that a lot was happening, and I like to think of it as like high-speed evolution. Like I knew I was in one of those moments of high-speed evolution for that year of 2015, especially 2014 to about the summer of 2016. It was so many things happened. But at least I had the Yoyu. I had the wherewithal enough to write as much of it as I could down, with the thought that someday it could possibly help someone else. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, I mean, I was honestly really curious. I mean, well, and it's interesting to share my personal experience, because when I was going through my dark night of the soul, I discovered when I went back to my journals, I've journaled since I was in, I think, 4th grade, but not always consistently. And the year that my husband was away living Tanjing Funing separately in another prefecture, I did not write once. It's really interesting. I mean, it's very telling. It makes total sense to me now looking back, but the last entry was me being very upset, very distraught. How are we going to get through this? You know, I think this is going to be a very hard year. And then the next entry is like, yep, it sucked. And I just never put it down on paper at that time, because I think I was simply in survival mode. Just how do I tread water? How do I get through this? I was doing whatever I needed to do to get through. So it's very interesting to hear that writing was your lifeline. It was your life raft, and it was what helped you really. And now you have all of these wonderful stories, and you know, you've got at least 2 books out of the experience, it sounds like.
I think so. I've had a hard time. It's interesting though, because now that this first one's out and I finished it, I can check that off. I've had a more difficult time getting back to the memoir and working on it. I feel like that time of my life is over. I want to move on. I want to do something different, but it's still there as something that could be helpful to people. And I did have the wherewithal to write some of those stories down then. So why not? And yeah, I might get back to it. I say that I am getting to it. So we'll see by the time this airs, maybe I will be sharing that. Yes, I have another 1,000 words edited or.
Right. It's so, like so many things in life, though, it's timing and energy and Yoyu. You know, when you have the Yoyu to work on it.
Yeah. And this last year, I really didn't. 2014 to 2015, 2016 was a big time for us. But in our family too, last year, 2024 to 2025, we had my husband retiring. We moved across the country. I had hip surgery. We had all these things that happened that just, I now feel like I'm settled and living in this new community.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think I'll get back to publishing.
Yeah, I think the best work and the best way that we can kind of live our lives is to recognize the ebb and flow of things and to find our way into that current without pushing against it or fighting against it.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I really agree with that about the ebb and flow. And I talk about this in the book, but that there is, you can't avoid that ebb and flow. You can't. There's always going to be times when we have or we don't have yo-yo, right? We have it, we don't have it. We have it, we don't have it. But if we can move our entire life towards having more of it, then those moments when we don't have it, it doesn't feel as much of, we don't feel as much of a lack, I hope. Yes. That's the goal anyway for me.
Yes, and also I love the idea, the concept that you bring up in the book of thinking about the different areas of you or the different areas of your life that you can kind of borrow from almost in a way. So if you're feeling especially lacking in some area, you can think, oh wait, maybe I don't have a lot of money, but I've got a lot of time and I can appreciate whatever, my children, or I can, take the time to journal and drink my coffee and, like exercise, like some people I know. And it can really, really help kind of compensate for that, maybe worrying about where we're lacking. So I would like to also invite you to share one of these kind of techniques or strategies that help us move our whole lives in that more abundant yo-yo filled zone. I always have a takeaway for my listeners at the end of each episode. So I would love to hear what you have to share with us today.
Sure. The first thing I thought of was that in the moments when I really didn't have yo-yo, I couldn't think about anything. Couldn't think about doing anything. And the one that was the most helpful to me was just to take 5. And I don't mean 5 minutes or even 5 hours. I mean really just 5 seconds, just enough to take a deep breath. And it seems like such a little thing and like, take 5, that's silly. But it made a huge difference for me to remember that over and over again. I would hear my father-in-law, Marci, or he didn't say Marci, he'd say Marci, and he'd yell for me. And I'd think, okay, I don't need to be stressed about this. I just take an extra 5 seconds to breathe and center myself before I would go in there to find out what the problem was, what had happened. Or if I went to use the bathroom, the restroom, before I came out, to stop before I opened that door to come back out again, just to take 5 seconds. And I know we can't always do that. We can't. Like if you, in the morning, you're waking up early because one of your children needs help, or maybe you're caring for an elder, whether that elder is a human or a cat or a dog. Sometimes we don't have that. We can't even take that 5 seconds, but maybe later in the day we can. Just to pause, just 5 seconds, not 5 minutes even, just 5 seconds. And if you can remember that, it starts to build up. How many times during the day can you take that 5 seconds? And you might feel more yo-yo in a lot of different ways. So that was the biggest one for me that I used the most, and I even still use it today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. And I wish I had that when I was going through my really difficult time of my life. I think that, again, something so simple, it's not even 5 minutes, it's 5 seconds. I think even a hand on the heart plus 5 seconds can be a total game changer. And maybe listeners listening to that think, well, what can that really do? But I completely agree with you. The more that we are able to offer those little moments to ourselves throughout the day, the more, one, we realize that we can do that. We can take that break, and it's not hard. And the more that we kind of start to be able to build up that little, I don't even want to say habit. I don't want to call it a habit. It's almost like this little magical treat for yourself. Like, this is just a little moment of care just for me. I'm just going to take 5 seconds. and then move on to the next thing. And I think that that can be hugely helpful, especially when we're going through really hard times. So thank you
Oh,
so
yeah.
much for that, Marci. That's wonderful. And I would just like to plug your book and your
Oh,
notebooks
thank
and your
you.
website. So why don't you go ahead and do a shameless plug at the end here? If people are interested in purchasing your book or your notebooks that we talked about today, where can they do that?
Sure. Well, my website is marcikobayashi.com, and hopefully you'll have that in the show notes if people aren't sure how to spell it. But the book, both the paperback, the ebook, and the audiobook can all be found at books2read.com/FY for Finding Yoyu.
Okay.
And that books to read is the number 2, books to read, books2read.com/FY. And I would start there. and or some of the things that we talked about today are on my website. And if you don't have the Yoyu to get the book right now, then I would say go to marcikobayashi.com/bonus, and you have access to all the free things that come with the book. It doesn't require your email or anything. Go check it out. If you don't have the Yoyu to read a book or to buy a book, a lot of the concepts and the ideas that we talked about today are on that page, and go for it. Have at it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I will make sure to put all of the links in the show notes. And I know Marci appreciates hearing from readers, listeners, people. So if you are curious, don't hesitate to reach out. I as well love to hear comments, feedback, anything about this episode or any of the episodes. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.